Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to see lots of familiar faces and lots of new faces joining us for the Coincidence Project monthly speaker series. And I am Juliet Trail. I'm the executive director of the Coincidence Project. And our speakers today are with me, Katrin Windsor and David Strabala. We record these sessions so that we can post them on YouTube and on our website. And we are in the process of creating that area to start archiving our events. So if you loved everything you hear today, you want to come back, will view it again or share it with others that you think would benefit. And one thing that will help us with the Zoom is to have yourself on mute if you're not the speaker. So if you could go and use your mouse, hover over your menu bar at the bottom left, the first command that you can click on is mute. And that helps us to not have background noise and wind and dogs barking and someone in your room walks in and speaks with you, all of that kind of noise. We can just mute that off. So welcome, welcome. This is Listening to the Heartbeat of Synchronicity and is our third, I think, in our monthly speaker series. Third month of this, and we are scheduled all the way through the end of the year, so we'll be posting about all of the upcoming speakers. We have members of our board like Katrin and David, and we'll have a few other distinguished coincidence allies who are experts in the field, who are part of our project, not serving on our board at this time, but have been tied with us and connected. They are collaborators to those of us on the board and in the project and supporting that work. So we'll have some of our coincidence allies as speakers, as well as all of the experts on our board. So next slide. The Coincidence Project is a global nonprofit. Our vision is to illuminate the invisible currents that connect and unify us. And this session today will really help to illustrate what we mean by that, the way that meaningful coincidences, serendipity, and synchronicity can highlight and bring to life in a moving, awe-inspiring, wondrous, sometimes silly, sometimes deeply profound way, how interconnected we all are and how we are held together by something much larger than any one of us, larger than ourselves. Next slide, please.
Can people see the slides or just us three of us?
Everyone, as far as I know.
Okay, all right. Because I can't see it. Okay, so
we still have some people joining us that are coming in from the waiting room. Welcome to those who are joining. We appreciate you being with us. We have 10 members of our board. This is on our About Us page of the website. Our founder is Dr. Bernard Beitman, who's one of the top experts of meaningful coincidences in the world. And his books, Connecting with Coincidence in 2016 and Meaningful Coincidences in 2022, really helped to outline this as a new field of study, an emerging area of coincidence studies within psychology. And our board has experts from all different fields, including authors, mystics, positive psychologists, filmmakers, those interested in divination, creativity, business and leadership, teams, consulting, creativity, intuition at work. I'm trying to think of all of our things. And teaching compassion meditation, which is something I do. We also have coincidence allies that you see in the smaller photos pictured on the right there. These are also on our website on the About Us page, and even more experts and highly prolific in terms of the number of books, which takes us to the next slide, I think, Kat. Once you get involved with the Coincidence Project, your desk may begin to look like this desk. These are some of the books, just a few of the books by members of the Coincidence Project serving on the board as our coincidence ambassadors, as well as our wider team of advisors and colleagues that we call the Coincidence Allies. And the study of meaningful coincidences helps us to understand the interconnectedness of life. It helps us to see how we're living and to enhance the ways in which we're living with flow and wonder, with hope and optimism. And within the project, with these events that we're hosting regularly and through our website, we are enabling people to meet other kindred spirits and to make new friends and even probably collaborators to do work on this in this field together. So we have a story forum where we invite all of you to add your own coincidence experiences. The stories are capped at about 300 words, and we invite you, you can upload a photograph that goes with your story, or we'll find one that matches it for you. And let us know about your own experiences in a short form so that you can scroll through. If you click on the links from the website to see all stories, you're able to scroll through them. Again, if you're not on mute, I will invite you to mute your computer so we don't get background noise. And I'll be posting in the chat a link to our website. And we are a nonprofit organization, which means we exist on philanthropy, on donations. And we welcome your donations. We are keeping this monthly speaker series, as well as our monthly Coincidence Cafe, free and open to the public. And we use the donations to help offset our costs, so that we're able to keep these things free for those who wish to attend. So we welcome any donations, and I'll be putting the link in the chat. I think we can probably turn it over to our speakers now. So I would like to welcome Katrin Windsor, David Strabala, to take it away from here.
Thank you, Juliet. Oh, go ahead, Kat.
So I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Juliet. And I'm so happy to be here with you. There's no coincidence that you are here. And I assume you're all kindred spirits, and there is some vibrational something that brought you here, that attracted us to each other. And this is definitely my favorite topic. I love the topic of coincidences and synchronicities. And I love the topic of listening to the heartbeat of synchronicity. And I'm thrilled to be here with my fellow board member, filmmaker David Strabala.
Yes, indeed. Same here. And it's kind of, I think, a coincidence, synchronicity, how we even came together on this. But we want to move toward kind of getting to helping people to get to know us individually. And I think one way to do that is to talk about a bit what, is maybe our favorite synchronicity, one that brought us to the group, or one that started off kind of opening up our lives to synchronicity. And so I'll start with one, or would you like to do one first, Kat?
No, you go.
Okay, all right. So I want to start with one that has to do with how I came to make a film on synchronicity, and that's how I met Bernie Beitman and so many of the other people. This was about 2007. And I'm a clinical social worker, and I was working with a young man about 15 years old. And he was saying about how much he was troubled about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That led to a discussion of what would the right place at the right time be like. And it was a pretty fruitful discussion. And at the end of that, curiously, he said to me, "That was neat. You ought to do a book on that." And it just hit me, dare I say, in the heart and in the head kind of at the same time. I couldn't shake it. It just stuck. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing how that happened? And what does it mean? And why is it sticking so much? And one of the ways that I realized that it stuck was it took me back to the very first synchronicity that I experienced when I was 12 years old. And that was when my sister died. She was 31 and I was 12. The circumstances around her death were very coincidental, as it turned out. The main one being, for the sake of brevity, a month before she died of a disease that she had for quite a while. She was very healthy, but we all got together, all 13. I'm the youngest of 13 children, and all of us got together with my parents for their anniversary, and then extended family. It was an amazing gathering, and everybody had a great time. And then about a few weeks later, my sister got real ill and died, and so that woke me up to what an amazing thing that was, that we had that final time together, all of us. And there were other things that went with that just made me aware of the story in people's lives, and how what seems like something very negative and positive, and how those two often go together. So that's a theme that I think we'll be talking about today as we go through. And maybe for you all to think about those transitionary periods in life where, especially if something difficult is occurring. And I think there was a similar kind of synchronicity that you were talking about too, Kat, that had, I think, a resonance with the experience of my sister.
Yeah, it's interesting how they do show up around death or strong moments of emotions or in transitions. And I remember the first one I ever had that really made me kind of sit up was I was an exchange student. I'm from Switzerland, and I was an exchange student in the United States. I was placed in Ohio. And one night I woke up and I just knew that my grandpa just died. And I walked to the phone. It was a tethered phone still at the time. And I just waited. And 15 minutes later, my mom from Switzerland called to say that my grandpa died. And one of the things that is really important, cool for me to be involved with the Coincidence Project is that we do these monthly coincidence cafes. And every cafe has a kind of a theme. And one cafe had the theme by one of our coincidence ambassadors, who is a zoologist in South Africa, Matt Silstra, and he co-hosted, and the topic was around coincidences related to the natural world. And we gathered in little breakouts, and like that theme that time was, oh my gosh, the birds show up when someone dies. And in particular, like for me, it was the great heron. And then Anne Helene also said the great heron showed up with her dad, and the great heron showed up with my mom, and people shared about birds and the cardinals, the seagulls, the great heron. So I hung up that, I closed my Zoom after that coincidence cafe, and I walked to the coffee shop, and I met a friend who said, whose dad just died a couple of weeks ago. And I said, hey, Nicole, how you doing with your dad just died? And she goes, okay. And I said, hey, did you have any signs around your dad's death? And she goes, should you ask that? But yes, there was a great heron that was flying next to our car. My mom and I were driving the car, were in the car, and there was a great heron that flew along our car, and then it turned, and the car, we hit it, and we killed it. And I was going, oh my gosh, first of all, on so many levels. One is we just heard about great herons showing up around death, but then the other one being like killing a great heron. So I asked her, and that's always a great question to ask, is what's the meaning? What meaning did that have for you, that you just had that experience? And she said, my mom was in denial until that very moment that we killed that great heron. And so it was deeply meaningful. So when you keep hanging out with us, you will start seeing these patterns, and suddenly you just start, wow, there are these themes. There's so much more than what we're aware of. So death, yeah, is one that usually shows us coincidences. So, hey, David, you came up with that amazing title. You said, let's choose the title for today to be Listening to the Heartbeat of Synchronicity. So let's talk about that title.
I have that quote hanging in my office, in my therapy office, and it's been there for a long time. When I saw that years ago, I just thought that seems to speak very well, at least to my experience of how I often relate to synchronicity and how I see it show up for many others. And there's just something not just about heart, but about the entire body that it speaks to, and how there's so many things trying to communicate with us that are rhythmic. And so as we get to thinking about the way that everything is beating, everything is rhythm, everything vibrates in the universe. So we can even start from that real basic level. And one of the ways that I think, is this where we'd want to bring in the video, I think, about showing the synchronicity.
Yeah, let's start at that level.
That's a real basic level, I think, to
heartbeat and rhythm and synchronicity. The universe is pulsating. We are pulsating. Juliet, will you be able to show that video? Well, here's another one, which is, we can't hear you, Juliet. I see your lips move beautifully. I can't hear what you're saying. So.
Sorry, the share screen options covers the mute options. I'm trying to get to it for us real quick. Yep, I've got it here.
More. What? I might have one more.
We've got someone not on mute. Can you please
had
mute
a-
yourself?
One more team left.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
It'll never
If you're
be
not
better.
on mute, please mute. Please make sure you're staying on mute. Because otherwise everybody gets to hear your background conversation. All right.
From where I was sitting, the video had a little bit of a lag, but I think we all get the idea that somehow everything starts synchronizing. You know, like fireflies too, they can be bleeping at different or lighting up at different moments, but then after a while, they all start like 1,000 fireflies. And so heartbeat is a pulsation. And you know, when I think about, I've been married for 30 years and I love my husband, and we've had some ups and downs, of course. And so when I was going through a down period, you know, reflecting on this marriage, and whether I really wanted to stay for a moment there, came back from a trip and I landed I live in Boulder, Colorado. So I landed at Denver airport and hadn't seen my husband for 2 weeks. And he was there standing there, and, you know, and my heart skipped just a beat faster. And so I was like, the heart knows. Like, so I just knew the heart knows. And David, I think you had one with your partner too.
Yes, indeed. It's one that I had not experienced before. Someone I met not that long ago, where we had a number of things where we're sort of opposites. And if I just went into my head and thought, well, how is this going to work out? It would, from a kind of objective or distant view, it would seem like, well, maybe, you know, we're not supposed to be together or something. But yet when we would hold each other, there was just a kind of a comfort or a kind of confidence that just came from my body, that it just felt right. And it always does. And so that's one of the ways I think, as I've followed that body, that heartbeat, that it is giving a message more to the brain rather than the brain. We often think, you know, we're so intellectual, usually in our culture, but there's so many ways that we get messages about how to relate to life that aren't necessarily logical or rational. And to listen to that can make life a lot more meaningful and a lot more in sync with who you are and what the universe, how you fit with the universe. And so I've been following that and that relationship, and it's been absolutely wonderful. So yeah, it's amazing how sometimes those can show up. And I'll bet many of you out there can think of moments like that. And I think part of what we want to do is just really raise that up and, validate that that's a way to relate that often we might not get support for. But I think in this group, those kinds of things that are more intuitive are definitely going to get support. And most of us have conveyed stories within this group already that have to do with that.
Yeah, so one of the goals for today's session really is also to normalize this, because I'm someone that has these things happen all my life. And for a long time, I was kind of thinking there's something weird about me, and it scared me too. Because, nobody else was really talking. Maybe they mentioned a quick coincidence, but nobody else was really talking about these things. And then I have a 30-year meditation practice and yoga practice, and so I've been, opening up. And the more I open up, the more these things started happening. And the more I was going, wow, like, why is nobody else talking about this? So when I met the Coincidence Project, it was just this huge sigh of relief. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am normal. I am healthy. I'm curious. I'm open. I'm growing. And a friend of mine, lost her son to a fentanyl overdose. So sad. And she's a doctor. And she always thought that as a doctor, in a way, she thought, well, when someone dies, someone dies. And then she started having so many things happen to her that she thought she was going insane, because she started having so many signs, so many messages, so many synchronicities happen. And so we started including her in the Coincidence Project. And now she is like, oh, wow, like life continues and there's so much more than we're aware of. So all of you who are here, we wake up, have had many of these, coincidences. And there's so many different types of them. So we would actually like to kind of get a sense of kind of what kinds of coincidences do you experience? Gosh, it's so weird for me not to see the audience, I have to say. I love seeing you, David, but not seeing the audience.
It takes a little getting used to.
Would you like to go to gallery view for a moment and ask people to raise their hands?
Yes, please.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna, there we go. I'm gonna have a gallery view. If you want to turn your camera on just for a moment, we'd love to see you. You don't have to, you can remain anonymous by having the camera off, but we would welcome to turn your camera on. Just click on start video at the bottom of the screen. Hi, everyone. If you didn't post yet where you are calling in from today, where you are Zooming from, please post. We'd love to know where you all are. It's fun to see people in different parts of the world joining together as part of this community. And we still have some folks joining the session, so we're growing a number as we go here. So welcome if you're someone who's just joined recently. So one way you can respond to Kat's prompt is to raise your hand at the bottom of the screen under reactions. You use your mouse and you click on reactions, has a smiley face emoji, and then you click on raise hand.
Well, and I think it would be also interesting to
you can post in the chat.
Kind of share what kind of coincidences, what are coincidences, right? Or what types are there? And there's so many of them. So David, why don't you rattle down a few so to jog people's memories?
Sure. One of the main ways to think of it to get started is just any transition that you've been through. Having to do with graduating, life, death, new starts, new beginnings. And then think about the location that they might occur. Do they occur when you're traveling, when you suddenly meet somebody that is very coincidental? Do they happen through the arts? Think about that. Or is there a certain art form that you enjoy? For me, it's movies. I can see myself in the stories many times, the fairy tales and movies that I watch. And that really helps get in touch with kind of my inner process. So it's important to also know yourself. That's going to help you tie in, I think, much better to coincidences and synchronicities all around you. The better that you know more about who you are, what your issues might be, your shadow things, your gifts. And then there's also serendipity, which is a little bit different because that generally has a little bit more to do with something being discovered, some kind of a product, some kind of an aspect that wasn't even being looked for probably, and somehow it shows up and it's very valuable. I'm also studying right now, I'm back in graduate school at Pacifica, and just studying Carl Jung, for example, and how he came up with the theory of complexes. From my viewpoint, it sure looked like a serendipity. He wasn't exactly looking for that. He was doing word association tests. And then people started hesitating in their responses, which at first was a problem. And then he realized, oh, those are something I'm going to call complexes. So there are a lot of different ways. If you look up online, do a search, you can find a lot of examples of that. You can also find it in dreams. Many times dreams will indicate something that turns out to be synchronicity or serendipity.
And we do have a couple of hands raised that we might want to
let's go for that.
people. We have Ed, then Amy, then Arlene. So Ed, if you want to speak. Are you there, Ed? Nope. Looks like we might have lost Ed. Amy, do you want to come off mute and share with us?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So thank you for the explanation. I guess that dives a little bit more into different selections for sharing. I guess one that comes to mind is, which I think maybe this is serendipity or coincidence, but you guys can let me know, is so I had been doing face painting for a while, and I like secretly like loved making music and thought these were like two separate worlds. And then I was getting like ideas of like, oh, what if it was like a meditation experience of having all of these worlds together? And it was interesting because then when I did like beta sessions and brought people together, it felt like none of these other experiences that I thought were separate and like weird of interest were so separate. They were all like orchestrating it all together to like bring me to that moment for other people to confirm like, yes, this is a cool experience. So I don't know what category I would put that in, but it feels like the things I experienced were not an accident because it inspired that experience.
Yeah, very cool. And the category may not really matter that much. I mean, some people it does matter more, and you can certainly do that if you like to try to narrow that down. But just the fact that it's meaningful to you, to me, is more important. And if it moves things along in some way, opens you up and more to life, to me, that's what the main thing of what makes it so valuable.
Yeah, so Arlene, let's take one more share and then we'll continue. Go ahead, Arlene.
Hear me okay?
Yeah, you're kind of in the background.
Is that better?
Yes.
If I get closer? Okay.
Yes.
So I wasn't going to share this, and then you all are hitting the themes there. So when my mom passed in 2009, before that, I found her on the floor. She broke her hip. When we were waiting in emergency with the paramedics, she said right to me, even though her blood pressure was so high and she wasn't speaking before, Arlene, have you seen your first robin? Because I have. And then she died 3 weeks later, and it was robins coming out of the woodwork. So my friend who lived like directly behind my mom, she brought some baked goods, as you do, and normally she would bake them, but it was kind of spur of the moment. So it was Robin's Nest Bakery, and my friend didn't know about this whole robin thing. And then that same friend was in her hot bathtub that night, and the song Fly Robin Fly came on, and she doesn't even believe in God or any of it, and she was calling me like, you just have to listen. And then I think it was the next day I had to take my car in, so they gave me a loaner car, and right beside the seat there was a business card that said Jane Hatcher. So Hatcher, like, you know, a bird, and that was the owner's ex-wife's last name. And then the night previous, Washington, D.C. were talking about the new cherry blossoms, and they zoomed in on this tiny little nest of robins. And then my mom's lab post at her house, I guess because nobody was going by there for, you know, although my brother was staying there after she died, but a robin's nest had decided that that was a good home right on her lamppost. And I mean, I'd been home from South Carolina for 9 years, and I'd never seen a robin's nest there. And just with regard to the cherry blossom, so my mom loved our Uncle Barry, and he was American. He was through marriage, and he was from Silver Springs, Maryland. So the fact that the cherry blossoms from Washington, D.C., then this old man drove by the house really, really slow, and he looked exactly like my Uncle Barry. So we were just getting a barrage of, and I mean, yeah, cardinals and things are also, but the robins was big for my mom. So now that I've found this group, like you say, Kat, you know, about all the birds and everything, it's good to know that other people experience these things.
Let's see by show, thanks for sharing, Arlen. Let's see by show of hands, who has experienced a coincidence or a message like that around someone's death? Yeah, so about half. Yeah. Okay, so we are very much into storytelling, and we believe that by coming together and telling stories helps us have, like first of all, being like this deep human connection. That storytelling is about deep human connection, but it really kind of makes us aware of it raises our coincidence awareness. And the more you raise your coincidence awareness, the more you start to wonder at the magic of how this universe and life and the reality of life is supporting us. So David, you're a storyteller, and you are more of an introvert, you said, and I'm an extreme extrovert, right? So we cover the spectrum, and so you tell stories through films and drumming, right?
Yes, that's one of the ways, and thank you for bringing that up, because it's introvert and extrovert is one of those dynamics, but there are so many others, of course, around personality. And so that's one of the things that can really help for relating to these experiences, is to kind of, again, know yourself. And so to know things about your personality is definitely one of those things. Yeah, the stories that I tell many times are fairy tales, things that have a fairly rich archetypal or symbolic nature to them. Some are also just plain fun and maybe a little bit silly. And there's one that I love to tell because it's weird, because it's both funny, but it's also tragic. And it's got this element to it of kind of the flow of the universe, how it can go back and forth. And the way that I've heard it, and the way I've kind of shared it with people many times with young people, especially in juvenile detention, where I do a lot of work, is I kind of check in with them this way and say, you know, there was this bird way up north in Canada, and in the fall of this one year, he didn't want to fly south with all his other bird friends. And they tried to convince him, but he said, no, I want to prove that I can hang out all winter long here and just make it through the harsh winter. So he tried, but he didn't get very far into it before he realized it was a mistake, and he had to try to go south. So he took off, but he didn't get very far because he got caught in an ice storm. And pretty soon his wings got totally frozen and he fell to earth. So there he is in the middle of a farm field thinking, this is it. What a way to go. What could be worse than this? Well, just then a cow came along and crapped on him. And he's like, oh man, I wondered what could be worse, and I just found out. But wait a minute, maybe some of you already know where this is going. The poop warmed him up, thawed out his wings, and so now he's beginning to, flap his wings and get out of there. He gets his head above it all a little bit, and he sees a bush nearby, and he thinks, in a few seconds, I can take cover under that bush. I'll be just fine. And so he's chirping away so loudly because of how happy he is, of course. Well, he shouldn't have done that, because nearby was the farm cat. And the cat heard those chirps of that happy bird and came over and, sad to say, cleaned him off and ate him. Now, that's only, the ending for the bird, but it's not the ending of the story that goes on in us, because we are always telling stories. And there are at least 3 things that we might be able to say about this. One is, not everybody who craps on you is your enemy. Number 2, not everybody who gets you out of crap is your friend. And number 3, if you're happy in a pile of crap, you might want to just keep your mouth shut. So it's a bit of a test also sometimes to see just how somebody's really feeling. If I can get them to at least smile at parts of that story, then maybe things aren't so bad for them. But and almost always they do. And it's a way of kind of getting in touch again with rhythm of how the good and the bad go together. And we tend to always want to, of course, lean toward what's good, but it's so hard to tell many times how the good and the bad can play off each other. And if I remember when we were talking about doing this program, Kat, you had a very similar story, which was, I recognize, as kind of universal, or we did in terms of different cultures, different countries having this kind of story in their background. Do you want to share that one?
Yeah, it's some of you may know it, and it's called the Stallion story. And I learned it as I heard that it was an old Chinese fable. But when I told it to my brother in Switzerland, he goes, oh, it's that German story. And I'm like, okay, it's like clearly universal. And there's like this truth that goes through some of these fables, right? So here is like, there's this farmer and he has the amazing mare. And stallion. And he wins a prize for the stallion, and all the neighbors come running over and they go, wow, congratulations, that's amazing, you won a stallion prize for your stallion. So then the farmer just said, well, who knows what is good and what is bad. So then a week later, the stallion gets stolen. And the neighbors come over and say, man, we're so sorry, your stallion got stolen. And the guy says, who knows what is good and what is bad? And then a week later, the stallion comes back, and somehow he found these mares. He got free and found these mares, and suddenly the farmer has a field full of horses. And the neighbors are like, wow, that's amazing, that's great. And the farmer says, who knows what is good and what is bad? The son of the farmer tries to tame one of the wild mares and falls off and breaks his leg. And the neighbors were like, wow, that's a bummer. And the farmer says, who knows what is good and what is bad? And the next, in a little while, the army, there's a war, and the army comes by and they conscript every able-bodied man. And of course, because the son had a broken leg, he wasn't conscripted. By then, the neighbors didn't come over anymore and wonder what the farmer said, because what did the farmer say? He said, who knows what is good and what is bad?
You know, one of the things I like about that story is, as compared to my bird story, is that you can kind of imagine that going on and on. You know, the bird dies, but in the story that you tell, you could extend that in different ways if you use your imagination. And that's often how life is, you know, that maybe because he didn't get to go to war, one of his friends died, and he might think, well, if I had been there, I could have had my friends back, or something like that. And so that becomes a bad thing. Or maybe he would have won medals of honor or something for fighting. So there are all kinds of directions you can go, and it makes it hard sometimes to determine the value on a synchronicity. And so it helps to hold it more loosely, to know that there's always a story going on. And just as I reflected on when I was 12, when that boy said to me, hey, you should do a book on synchronicity. If we reflect backwards and then imagine forward, a lot of times we can find themes in our life that really help guide us with each little thing that might come along, each little coincidence or each little synchronicity, a dream or whatever. So that way, what it does is it gives us more of a wholeness, more of a filled out kind of sense of life, a broader connection. And I think that's in general what fairy tales and stories can do, is they evoke imagination. They have to do with telling us that somehow things will turn out okay most of the time. And so it helps us to feel more at home, more at peace, rather than something so linear as we often get up into our heads sometimes too much. So there's just so much that stories can do, whether it's a fairy tale or whether it's the story of your life or a synchronicity. You have other thoughts, Kat, about the value of stories and how you use them?
Well, I mean, I had, I'm fascinated by writing down my stories of coincidences. And I only started that about 5 years ago, when I had a spiritual coach, session with a spiritual coach, and she was a numerologist, and she said, oh, you're a number 33 in numerology. That means you're like this master soul, and you're supposed to tell your spiritual story. And I was thinking, well, I don't think people care about my spiritual story. That sounds very self-centered, right? So, but something on some level. So I thought, let me go into the desert and do a vision quest. So I'm going into the desert. I'm, going on this vision quest, and then I come out of the desert, and I'm going, hey, maybe that's a myth about these vision quests. I didn't get a vision. Anyway, but on the way home, I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to write down those strange things, that all these coincidences, all these telepathic experiences, all these precognition, psychic experiences, that I seem to be having. Let me write those down. Let me see if I can come up with 33 stories to honor, this coach's thing about 33. So I came home, I whipped out a stack of index cards. I wrote down like one card, one story. And at 46, I stopped. And then I went every day at 6 a.m. to our local coffee shop, and I wrote for 90 minutes, one story a day. And I asked a bunch of friends, can you be my accountability buddies? Can I send you one story a day? You don't even have to read it. I just need you as accountability buddies. So I'm writing my story one a day, and I fire it off. And wow, you all have to do that, because it was an amazing awakening on some level. Because when you focus and you start paying attention to all these things that happen that are just way beyond odds, and then strings of coincidences that let you start connecting the dots backwards. I found a string of 40 years of why I'm in Boulder. Wow, it just blows my mind. And so it was really kind of an awakening. Something else that happened is the impact it had on my friends. They started to read my stories, and then they started tapping into their stories, and they started sending me their stories. And suddenly, like, by me telling my stories, that's why I want you to tell your stories in your world, you will start not just your own kind of awakening up or like kind of opening up on some level, but you help others. Because so many people I went to for a dinner, and I, said, oh, I'm writing these coincidence stories. And then some people say, well, I never have any coincidences, and then his wife was like, oh, but don't you remember we were in Paris all the way out in a far off neighborhood, and then you bumped into your roommate from college in Tennessee, and then people go, oh, yeah. And so what happens is that suddenly you become aware of how there's so much more in life than what we're aware of, and everything is connected. How do you explain to yourself that you bump into a friend in the Arctic Circle, and then you go to Fiji the following year and you bump into the same friend. Like, I mean, that is so like, and that happens again and again. So storytelling. So I want to share this one picture because I was at Wisdom 2.0 conference in San Francisco last week. And I said, okay, I'll host a dinner around coincidences and stories. And you know, it was like a birds of a feather kind of a dinner that's starting to happen at conferences. It's a cool thing. And there's 30 people who came. And these people that were at my table, I didn't know them. They were strangers when I met them. But when you ask them about their coincidence stories, suddenly that's like, there is delight, there is surprise. It's meaningful, authentic connection. So after 2.5 hours of having met these strangers, we leave, we give hugs to each other, we leave as friends. So the power of story is really cool. And your own coincidence stories are really cool. Share them, pay attention to them. So yeah, storytelling.
That is beautiful. That's an awesome picture too, Kat. That just is really inspirational, even for an introvert like me. That, you know, I mean, I do get out in groups. You know, if I have my djembe drum and I'm invited somewhere, I'll tell a story to a big group with my drum and so on. So I enjoy doing that, and it's great to see just the spontaneous nature of what you did there, and how sort of contagious it is when people start telling their stories. And I think in our individual lives, it's that way too, as we see themes, certain patterns occur. And just as to extend the story about how I got into doing a film on synchronicity, as I said, this boy had told me about, hey, you ought to do a book. And there were so many books that I just wasn't sure I wanted to do that. And then I realized there were no films. So I'd never made a film before. So I thought, well, how could I go about that? I started hanging around a group. And so this is a little bit of maybe getting into a tip about if any of you are thinking of taking sort of a step or a leap into some new creative venture or something, business, whatever it is, you may naturally kind of hang around people or situations where you're going to be fed, you're going to be interacting with that kind of material or those kind of people. So I did that, and sure enough, it wasn't long before there was an invitation for volunteers to help somebody on a film set. And weirdly enough, it was somebody doing a documentary on teenage girls in trouble, which is a group that I work with in therapy. So that was like a little cha-ching, you know, hey, pay attention and go that way. So I did, and that's where I met who turned out to be my director of photography for the film, David Gilmore. And the way we met was we just started talking, and he asked what I was doing there. And pretty soon he's like, well, I know a lot about synchronicity. I've studied it, which was amazing. And then he got interested in helping me. And by the end of the weekend of this set, we had exchanged numbers, but I was just kind of like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm really gonna, you know, do this yet. I hadn't really decided. Well, we happened to meet up in the parking lot, and he turns to me before we parted and he said, are you really going to do that movie? And oh my gosh, it just, again, went to my whole body. And I knew within 1 second that I had to say yes. It was like the invitation of the universe through him calling me out to be sincere about making it, because I knew he wanted to help. So I could only say yes. My body, my vocal cords could only say, yes, I'm going to do it. And so that's my little story to kind of say, sometimes this is how these leaps can happen. At least that's what it was like for me. And then it was a 6-year project from that point on. But I had so many things and so many people that helped me with each phase of making that film. And it was just really fabulous. So I think it's kind of one of those right place, right time things that when you're in touch, when you're with that, you know, with the heartbeat, at least for me, that's one of the ways it really resonated. So I offer that as a support to anybody out there who's having similar thoughts, little inklings of maybe I should take a step, just hang out and see what happens in the area of the people and things that are doing it.
Yeah, and it's fun. It was fun to see when you said you just knew right? Here you touched your heart. And like synchronicities show up and somehow we just know, the heart knows. And so I'm going to share also this screen, which is about, again, the heartbeat and vibration. So like people entered your past based on vibration. People left your past based on vibration. Similarly, people will find you based on vibration. People travel in and out of your road based on vibration. Trust the organic unfoldment of your journey. And hey, that's probably across lifetimes. I do believe in that. That it's not just one lifetime. So why be in a hurry in this lifetime?
Yeah. You know, it gets into a complex area, which could be called quantum mechanics, and how the future and the past and the present are all kind of together. And so sometimes we get inklings from the future about what we're supposed to do. And that was something Dean Radin brought out in my film. It's a bit of a long story, but in essence, there was a person who had a sense of not putting all the bullets back in his gun. He had permission to carry, and he didn't put all the bullets back in. And sure enough, it was good that he didn't, because somebody grabbed his gun and tried to use it against him. But when they pulled the trigger, the revolver advanced to an empty spot, and then he was able to wrestle it away from him because there was no bullet there to shoot him. So then Radin did research around that whole idea of, do we have a sense? Does our body, our energy have a kind of a premonition of something good or bad coming our way? And there was evidence to show that that is often the case, only we're just not aware of it. So another little kind of sidebar thing that we don't have time to get into in length, and nobody really understands quantum mechanics anyway, according to those who have studied it. But it's part of our universe. It's part of how things are operating now so much, even if we don't understand it. So it's important then maybe to bring that into our lives in our own personal way, to kind of trust those intuitions. And you have to be careful. It doesn't mean that all of them you're always going to be right, quote unquote, but just to check and balance and kind of play with things in a way to be open to what might be wanting to enter your life.
Yeah, listening to the heartbeat of synchronicity. Bernie also did, Bernie Beitman, the founder here, Dr. Bernie, who I think is the world's leading researcher on coincidences. And hi, Bernie. And Bernie did he's an active contributor to Psychology Today. And he did a piece on do coincidences save lives, is what just came up for me as I tuned into your story about the guy who didn't get killed by that gun. So yes, trusting, and we're all connected. We are all connected. So I think we're coming to a close, or did you want to say anything else, David?
I think we've covered most of what we had. Were there any other tips that we didn't cover? I guess I'm wondering about that. I think we've hit most of them. It's kind of little tips to get in touch with coincidence and synchronicity.
Yeah,
more.
that's a good point. Like one of them for sure is what I found is like, I have to be out and about. It's really hard to have a lot of coincidences if you're just in front of your computer all day long, right? So I'm an extrovert, I'm always out. I also think that harmonizing with nature helps to get that kind of bigger picture synchronicity connection. Paying attention, start paying attention to your coincidences. There's more than you know of these things happening, and listening. Oh, one more thing, like receiving, daring to receive, practice the art of receiving, letting come. Like we need to be more open so the universe can help us out. If we're all contracted like this, hammering away at our stuff, being all tense and stressed, It's really hard for the universe to come knocking, right? But like open up, receive.
That's beautiful. It's a great way to wrap up, and just to remember that, you know, deeper parts of ourselves are always trying to connect with us from what's going on outside, what's going on inside through intuition, dreams, hunches, and all of that. And when you can work from the inside and the outside and bring them together, life has a lot more coherence, a lot more kind of peace, and the ability to trust, I think, is maybe a bottom line issue, that as far as ways that we benefit from connecting to synchronicity.
So we hope to, you know, to just, if this resonates, which I make up, it totally does, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So you are part of this community. So join us on those third Saturdays of the month. Share your stories in our story forum. And Juliet, did you want to say some other things?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to Katrin and to David for sharing their wisdom. We'll do different topics every month in our speaker series, and different topics each month in Coincidence Cafe. And we have members of the Coincidence Cafe community join us to co-host and develop topics. So if there's something you're very passionate about, you're welcome to start coming to Cafe and suggest the topics, perhaps even nominating yourself to be a future co-host. We are growing the community all the time, and we hope these events will continue to grow and proliferate. And I think you can click in the chat to save the chat next to meeting chat to go in the, are there 3 dots there for folks that want to save the chat? Kat, can you test that for me?
I don't think, let's see.
At the bottom, underneath the little icons, there's the ellipses or 3 dots. Yep. You can click on those 3 dots and there's an option to save the chat. That's a usual Zoom kind of feature. As long as the hosts have it enabled, they can turn it off. But if you'd like to save the chat from today, people shared some interesting stories and observations and comments during the talk, and I posted some different links there so you can get back to them. I'll also share that on Monday, we are launching our first public fundraising campaign, since we are a global nonprofit existing on donations. It's our spring campaign is going to run in May and June, and it's called The Power of Connection, which we believe in most deeply. As we are listening to the heartbeat of synchronicity, we can feel much more connected to one another. And our organization exists to help bring these things more to conscious awareness. As Kat was saying, just by virtue of paying attention, you will begin to see more and more of it and increase your coincidence awareness, your coincidence sensitivity. And eventually you'll see them all over the place. And we call those high frequency coinciders. People that are seeing this all the time. And I just dropped the link in the chat. If you have the means to donate, would like to do so, any gift, no gift is too large. We are all about abundance if you wish to share yours with us. And also no gift is too small. It all helps us to exist and to do what we're doing. And I will say one of the things that's nice about using the term coincidence to be inclusive of both synchronicity and serendipity. Some people have different ways they use these terms. And I think it was Amy maybe that shared her story and was saying she wasn't sure if it was coincidence or serendipity or what that brought her to things converging so nicely in a flow. Sometimes synchronicity is most commonly taken to mean meaningful coincidence. Things falling together in time, as Carl Jung first documented and coined the term and pointed out. Things fall together in time and they fall towards us as the experiencer, and we become a fundamental part of the synchronicity. And then there's another person or an aspect of nature or a dream or something in reality or music that also becomes part of the story. If there's another person involved in the coincidence, kind of like David's story about the bird, at the end, the story went on because it became part of the cat's story. And maybe the cat was starving and would have died without that bird. And so it could have been a coincidence that brought the bird in time to nourish the cat before it starved, as another story of saving lives. We don't know. We don't hear from the cat's perspective in that particular version of the story, but there could be another version of the story where we only learned about the cat. And that's true of the other or others that are involved in our coincidences. They have their own interpretation of events, and it may be deeply meaningful in other ways, unknown ways for them too. So part of what we can do, as Katrin does so well, is get out and about and share these stories and talk with people, because sometimes you might find the other person in the coincidence is present, and you can actually begin to explore, what did it mean for you? Sometimes we forget that we have that capability as well, to not just investigate our own experience, but to more deeply listen and tune in to others and to ask what their experiences meant for them. And for me, one of the reasons that I think meaningful coincidence or coincidence is nice as the umbrella term is because that sense of what is meaningful can really shift over time. In the moment, a coincidence might seem like a coincidence. A couple things happen at the same time. That's interesting, but not particularly meaningful. But then the pattern repeats, and it repeats again. Or then something comes much later because of that earlier one, and it turns out it was the seed that was planted that made everything possible later in a way that was deeply profound or meaningful or important. And so if we're too quick to dismiss the things that are the mere coincidence, just a coincidence, we hear these adjectives put in front of coincidence that start to dismiss it. And that you hear that a lot as people describe these things. We don't always know that it was a mere coincidence or it was just a coincidence. Those terms are not as helpful. I think remaining open to receiving in the way Katrin was describing, that we are open to receive our experience, to tune into it more deeply, to begin to notice things, to document them, write them down, or record them by sharing them in a story with a friend aloud or a diary of some sort, can really help us hold on to those details. They can be a bit ephemeral, drift away from us. So I think if we're not too swift to judge what is meaningful, if we allow meaning to come to us over time in waves, to unfold as more things add to its meaningful nature, it can be much more clarified that something that seemed very simple and not that impactful turns out to be deeply important or impactful, or part of a trend or a pattern that's important to us. So it's good to suspend that sense of judging and categorizing too quickly, and instead to maybe notice the factors, notice the feeling of impact. I loved your stories, David, where you talked about, your body leapt, your heart, shifted. There was nothing you could do but respond in a way of, saying yes, or Katrin, you were describing, with your husband, the heart skipped a beat again, even though you've been together for many years. And it's like the heart knew something the mind might not have had conscious access to yet. And so our coincidences are like this. If we just notice what's happening and stay aware and open to receiving new insight as time goes forward, it may continue to reveal itself to us. And so I think our speakers can stay on for about another 10 minutes. We've reached the end of our hour together. We'll continue to do this series. We thank all of you for being with us. For those who need to leave, we say thank you and glad you could be here. That's why we exist, is to bring us all together and have this power of connection. And to those who might want to raise their hand, if there's someone that had a thought or a question, we will stay on for a few more minutes together here past the top of the hour and the end of our program.
Well, I would love to have people type in the chat. How are you feeling right now? Thank you. Yeah, that's why we're doing this. That's exactly why we're here, and help us spread this vibe.
Yeah, thank you. And for the video, for those that might watch this later, some of the ways people are feeling is grateful with some thank yous, excited, empowered, optimistic, encouraged, alert, connected, affirmed. sad but hopeful. Yep, hang in there. That's many of us on many days, isn't it? Hopeful is the nice part when we can add that to the mix. Ready to get out in the beautiful day. Yes, go connect, find more coincidences, and feeling connected to each other, to all of us. And some are loving our presentations. Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and a sense of connection and validation. So yes, thank you. These are wonderful things.
Okay.
So I'm going to remove the spotlights and just go back onto people being able to see one another now. Hello, those who are left. Did anybody have anything they wanted to share?
Well, I saw Danielle's comment in the chat. I mean, we should have maybe spent more time on the chat. There was some amazing coincidences around horses and then herons, but Danielle also, I read your comment when I was going, oh, you know, extrovert, like I need to be out and about and I have more synchronicities there. And I think you're the one that shared that you're more of an introvert and you're having synchronicities at home, all like in a more, without being so out and about. Yeah.
And come off mute. There.
Yeah, that was that was me. I kind of by nature an extrovert, but when I'm in my own space alone is when I have like the craziest coincidences, but seemingly not meaningful. But I think it's a way that my higher self or spirit guides are saying, hey, we're around. At least I think. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, and just keep paying attention to those sometimes that don't even seem that meaningful. Yeah.
Totally.
Anything else? Everybody's good? Oh, okay. All right. I think it feels
well. I really appreciate the storytelling. I mean, Kat, you really got to go in there with your own stories, and you added the idea that not just telling stories the way we do here. It's turns out to be a little cumbersome to tell the story to each other in person, but it's a wonderful thing to do, as your gathering in San Francisco demonstrated. But you've added, let's do it by email. Let's do it by texting. Tell your coincidence stories. Write them down.
Mm-hmm.
Write them down. I mean, that's one thing we keep suggesting you do is write them down. But if you got any friends, send them out to your friends. Ask them if they are willing to look at them, and Kat X. Well, you don't even have to read them. Just let me get held accountable, which I think is a wonderful way of getting them to read it, just because it's reverse psychology, as we used to call it, but they might not really read it anyway. So at least you know you sent them to 10 people or so. And that's what one of the practical things that's come out of this. And the other thing is that both of you are doing with your farmer story and your bird story is you're illustrating how there is no beginning here to time, that it's arbitrary when we start the story, that time keeps going, and there was a past and there's a future. And then David, this thing about being drawn to the future, this it's called something, but
Teleology, maybe.
Well, teleology was going to. That's what Jung called it, but that's future causality instead of retro causality. That the new term for teleology from you today really is that this teleology is driven by a cause from the future. And cause can have the meaning of you have a cause to believe in that you need to manifest. Mm-hmm. And that's a second use of the word cause. So this future causality is a way of better defining teleology. And you may as well tell your group, part of your graduate school thing, you've just added a little bit extra to the teleology.
Yeah. Yeah. One way that I sometimes think of it is cause and effect usually has to do with being pushed or shoved. And that's how we almost always think when we hear the word cause. But another kind of cause, as you just said, I think of as being kind of pulled or drawn. Again, it has to do with future. So
that's how Ken Bell, who's so quiet, got to us and has been a great contributor. Ken, you keep being on, so I can't look at you, but I hope you're still there. And Ken felt the pull to help us in many ways on our website and hopefully other ways. And that pull was to a future that's existing now. And we're very grateful for his continuing contributions to editing stories and helping us with other stuff.
and it reminds me of one of the ways that I love to use stories, especially fairy tales or myths, is that they can kind of map where you are in the process of your life. When you hear a fairy tale, let's say, or for that matter, a movie that you might watch, see what part of it grabs you right in the moment, something that kind of makes you stand up in some way, either positively, negatively, whatever, where you might go, man, that's what I'm living right now. Then you have right there a sense of kind of where you are, and then that can imply where you're going or what lies in front.
It kind of occurs to me that everything is caused by the future. I've recently been thinking about that quite a lot, actually. So that I guess what has come out of this meeting for me today is that particular thing. And I think a lot of it involves large groups of people having similar experiences, politics, the war, things like, let's say, there's been a lot of discussion of death today. Both of your stories were about injury and death leading to, one led to death actually, and the other one to something else. But what happened to me yesterday had to do with DNRs not being honored. That seems to be happening a lot, at least here in Santa Fe, where people are going into the hospital and they've signed a document saying do not resuscitate for any reason, and it's being ignored. So a friend of mine lost a friend this weekend, and that happened. She started CPR, his wife, and she freaked out. That's understandable. But he had a DNR in place. He had severe cancer. He was in pain all the time. He was rushed to the hospital, and now there's $1 million bill that she's probably, I mean, his insurance isn't going to cover. The hospital should have refused to treat, but they didn't. Anyway, these things come up, and I think that there's something in the future that is bringing them into consciousness and asking us to think about these things, about death, about the process, about the legal issues around it, the political ones. And, we have this huge war where a lot of people are dying. Before that, we had a virus where a lot of people were dying. All of that, I think, is being caused by some need in the future that regards the planet as a whole, not just, and large groups of people, not just individuals.
Thanks, Cheryl. I think that points to the psychosphere that Dr. Bernie has been describing, sometimes related to the unus mundus or collective consciousness notion that there's a meta level of human consciousness and awareness where we're influencing one another, we're resonating in the same field. Kat had that beautiful quote about how we're all resonating beings, we're resonating bodies, we're built of particles that resonate. And we don't really know the difference between where the mind ends. The mind is more of a field the brain is an organ that lives in the body, but the mind seems to be way, way more than just that organ. And the mind might extend into levels of personal conscious and collective conscious, maybe even cosmic consciousness. And as we can navigate those levels, becoming aware, and if personal conscious might be influenced by a future cause, then collective conscious or psychosphere may equally be influenced by future causes. So perhaps as you're seeing an issue come to the surface, that it's indicating something resonating in the psychosphere that may be coming to the surface for many people. But also Kat had to go, so she sent her thanks and had to step away. I think we'll stay on for only about maybe 4 more minutes. So Mary, you've had your hand up, so probably our last comment today. Mary.
Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the things that brings me here, and I'm so happy to be here to have discovered your organization, is that in the last year, I've become aware of Lynn McTaggart and her power of 8, and I learned a lot about consciousness and energies in the universe. And I'm excited about it. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
We're glad to see some of you that are back, and we're glad to see those of you that we've not met before. So thank you for all of the above. Anybody else want to say anything before we log off for the day here?
Only that I think that we don't just mentally exist in this field. I think that we completely exist in these fields, and that the field itself is changing. That's why we're being affected in such huge multiple numbers. That's it. And it was very nice to see you again, all of you.
And the
Yes.
field is being affected by what we're doing here. It needs to be said many times that part of the reason to be involved with this coincidence, synchronicity, serendipity is we're doing a little suicide here as a humanity. And
Yes.
synchronicity will connect us meaningfully and help us get away out of this slow suicide that we're involved with.
That's my hope as well, Bernie.
Good. Keep going, keep hoping, and it's a future we want to imagine. There is a future that we're drawn to, but there's a future that we have to imagine, and we can imagine, that then draws us. So it's reciprocal. David, you like that one.
Yeah, I love paradoxes.
Yes. I'm just reminded of one more thing that fits here. A long time ago, I heard philosopher Sam Keen talk about heroism and how he's probably not the only one to say this, or first maybe, but that the future had to do more with a group kind of heroism, not so much the individual. The individual is still important and all that, but there's something about essential or what's on the cutting edge of heroism as being more expanded. I think this is a real easy example from the movies, but just the Wizard of Oz, the group of people, heading there, so here we are in this group. And that's, to me, what gives it a lot of meaning to think in those terms. And you just don't know how we're going to feed each other and feed the world. So happy everybody has been here today. And it just is a great joy to present, and thanks for all the contributions.
Thank you. You're welcome to come off mute, and we can give each other a fond farewell here. We would welcome to hear your voice.
I'm
Nice to see you
reminded of
again.
that hand drawing, one hand drawing the other hand,
Yes.
of the future and the past.
Mm.
Coming together in this present.
Hey, David, if you want an example of the group together, read. I can somehow get you, Joe. Joe at your place,
Cambry.
Cambry, has written about penicillin, and the penicillin story is a story of a whole bunch of people making penicillin happen, from Alexander Fleming to its serendipitous discovery in a Peoria a farmer's market of the mold that works, with 10 different serendipities right in between, with people doing it.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and close out our recording today.